I wanted to bring this video to your attention. I came across it on Twitter, and it's from Pensacola, Florida. A school board candidate, Elisa Janai Lancaster, she says doctors who treat trans kids should be hanging from the nearest tree. And the crowd applauded her when she said that. So I thought, ooh, what's going on here? Let me watch this video. So let me play it for you, and then we can get some reactions.
A grandmother of 3 and very excited to have a 4th grandchild on the way. I retired after 28 years as a Federal Reserve law enforcement officer, protection services. I was an operations supervisor at the time I retired. Our division provided dignitary escorts and protection. We conducted treasury operations and research and investigations. I have an associate's degree in criminal justice and received my law enforcement certification through the state of Colorado. I am a conservative and hold Christian values and beliefs. I would love to see the prayer reinstated instead of the moment of silence. Our country was founded on Judeo-Christian values and beliefs that I believe should be respected and encouraged. The welfare and protection of the students is my first and foremost priority. That is one of the main reasons I decided to run. I am in favor of the Guardian program and against any social engineering projects, especially CRT or any ideologies that do not belong in the school platform. The children should not be burdened with the woke agenda that is leaving a path of destruction everywhere it goes. Just to mention what has recently surfaced, the pharmaceutical companies are paying $1.3 million for each gender reassignment. I don't know about you, but I am wondering how they are getting in contact with these children. These doctors that are going along with mutilating these children and prescribing hormone blockers to these kids, in my opinion, they should be hanging from the nearest tree. Follow the money. Follow the money and you can see where these agendas are heading. Another main reason why...
¿Eso es todo?
That's it?
Damn.
Well, what more do you want?
I know. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. That was quite a lot to unpack. I mean, it's pretty impressive all that she was able to squeeze in 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
Right? Judeo-Christian values to go hang someone. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what Jesus had in mind. It's always so remarkable how contradictory religious people, not all of them, but they contradict themselves when they're talking about their religious values and what they would hope to do to other people.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways, the irony that the country was founded, for the most part, by people. Well, I guess the U.S., the United States, was founded by people fleeing religious persecution. Yeah. Obviously, the Spanish and others also came because of the economic incentive and their desire to expand their empires. But yeah, that irony of...
But I have noticed that a lot of these Christian fundamentalists, they do want to always point out that the nation was founded on Judeo-Christian values. But more than anything, the nation was founded on capitalist values, and the separation of church and state. They wanted to limit the power of the church. So if anything, it was like religion took a backseat. Just because the founders were Christians themselves doesn't mean that they... I mean, if the country would have been founded on Judeo-Christian values, they would have made it so that the church would have had so much power, right? But it's the rule of law, and in that sense, the church doesn't have a lot of say. I understand what they're trying to say, but I feel like they misrepresent that all the time.
Yeah, I think the church did have a large role to play in the colonization of Latin America, though. Right?
Well, that was but that's not the U.S. So it was a Protestant. You're talking about the Catholic Church.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why the Protestant, when you think about why the Protestants left, why they're Protestants in the first place, and then obviously the whole history of the power of the Church of Rome, in particular persecutions,
Mm-hmm.
the and just before the encounter between Europe and the Americas, the fact that the Jewish people were expelled or forced to convert into Catholicism. So yeah, so it's definitely a very complicated history, and I still don't understand how her law enforcement background has anything to do with serving on the school board.
Yeah, right.
It was interesting how she kind of
Well,
credentialed
she wants to throw her
herself.
credentials out there to try to give herself legitimacy. But what I want to talk about is not her credentials or not her so-called fake Judeo-Christian values. What I want to talk about is her so casually saying that doctors who perform sex operations should be hanging from a tree. Like, if that doesn't send chills down your spine, then you haven't been paying attention, or you're not paying attention, because this is a trend and this is a direction that you do not want to see people going in. This normalization that just because you don't agree with your political opponents, just because you don't agree with what they're doing, that you think that you can resort to some type of mob like justice to hang people from
Hmm.
trees.
Yeah, that is very problematic, and I think very indicative of how toxic our politics have become. And again, I attribute, well, it's happened before, right? But I think also in the more recent history, I think what happened on January 6th, and a lot of the politics, the fact that they wanted to hang Mike Pence for not overturning the election, I think is a type of toxicity that's certainly impacting.
And certainly, I mean, you can spend hours, days, you can write entire dissertation papers on who bears the blame here. But sure, you can put some of it on the people themselves, but you have to single out the politicians that pick up on these things and then use them just to score points because they're more interested in getting elected than the type of culture that they're encouraging and promoting. For example, do you remember when McCain and Sarah Palin were running against Obama, and you had the more right wing, conservative wing of the Republican Party saying that he was a Muslim, and then there was a town hall where an older woman she got the mic and she said that she liked McCain because Obama was a Muslim and a terrorist. So you even back then, that's what some of the people were. This wasn't. McCain was playing on it, but to his defense, he did correct her, and she said, "No, no, ma'am, he's not a terrorist." Even she had gone too far for him. But the entire media establishment, the all the politicians, they pick up on these things and they run with them because they think they can win by tapping into people's anger or outrage. And now they've honed in on this woke culture, and they've honed in on the fact that the liberals, they make it seem like the liberals want to turn your kids into want to make them transgender, and right from there they extrapolate that the liberals want to destroy like the nuclear family and all these things. And at the end of the day, it's for like a very short-term goal of getting elected or getting views. But the long-term consequences of doing that is that you do start um, fomenting a type of anger out there and a type of outrage among the masses where they start getting more and more extreme. Because there's a lot of people that really do think that the most existential threat to America at this point is woke culture,
Hmm.
or the fact that there's research out there that says that gender is not really known, that you can't really say that someone that's born to a male body is going to be a man, and that a kid that's 8 or 10 years old, that it's perfectly fine if they want to have a sex change operation. Like, look, I personally think that there's definitely a lot of debate that you can do there. There's definitely a lot of discussion that you can have there. Like, I'm not saying that I completely agree with that. I do, I can see both sides of the argument, but at the same time, I'm not consumed by that, right? To the level where I think that that's just going to cause our whole society to fall apart. I'm more concerned about big picture items like, oh, all the jobs went overseas. Oh, I wonder, why that happened. The unemployment, the cheap interest rates, the war in Ukraine, about things that to me matter a lot more. But people like them, like the woman in this video, they get so consumed by what they perceive as the biggest existential threat right now, which is woke culture. And then you have all these YouTube personalities that pick up on this, and then they start pretty much beating the same drum, and going along with this, and then scaring all these people into thinking that woke culture is going to destroy their lives.
Yeah, and I think why the woke culture argument has gotten so much traction is also the fact that it's threatening their kids, right? So the future generation. And so I think acknowledging that a lot of this pushback is out of fear, right? They fear that, a genuine fear that if your kids are exposed to this information, they're going to question their sexuality and maybe act out in ways that they're not supposed to, or maybe they're just doing it because. And I have one friend who shared his experience talking to his young daughter, because I guess it is true that in some schools the kids find it cool to say, "Oh, I'm gender non-binary, right? I like people from my same sex to kind of seem cool."
Mm-hmm.
And then if the cool kids think that, I think there's this perceived pressure of people. Oh, maybe I'm gender not conforming too, right?
Yeah,
So
something similar to younger kids, like middle school kids or high school kids, thinking that they can somehow differentiate themselves, or get attention by saying that they're depressed, right? Like the trend, like, oh, everybody's depressed these days. Whereas there's a lot of people that are depressed, but you don't know how many of them are actually saying it because they think there's like some edge or some angle to saying like, oh, I'm just a loner. Like, remember, it's like the emo kids, but now the emo kids are the depressed kids. So something similar to saying, oh, I'm non-gender. But I certainly can see how it can become problematic if you have parents or school members encouraging sex change operations for kids, especially before a certain age, because that's something that you can no longer reverse, right? Or that's like a permanent change. But maybe I'm just a little more tolerant. But if kids, 3-4 year olds that play with dolls, or even 5 or 6 or 7, and they want to dress up with dresses, if they're just going through that natural discovery, and let them go through that. I mean, puberty is going to let you know, and either they'll remain the same way or they'll just snap back into one of the traditional heterosexual roles.
Yeah, because I know that there's kids who are younger who already know or feel more comfortable expressing themselves in a certain gender. But I think that's the problem. I think as a society we're so used to, and I think biologically too, right? It's fight or flight, is black or white, is good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
which I think religion is based on. So I think that uncertainty of 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 letting your kid, but it doesn't even start with your kid, it starts with society, because then when you start breaking down all the ways that we tell a little boy or a little girl how they need to behave, right? So I think there's a bunch of other complications, and the reality, this is it, right? Like, I think in some ways society has been structured. It's the way it is for simplicity or because of power, right? Because okay, we just have two genders, two bathrooms, and we have the boys on one side, the girls on that side. So it's more clean cut. It's less complicated, right? It's simple. So I think as a society dealing with all the complications that come with somebody, and I think we also made more progress, right? In terms of having
Mm-hmm.
uh, bathrooms that are available to all genders, right? And other things that having conversations, trying to understand. And I know we had a conversation too around trans kids and trans athletes, right? And the
Yeah.
impact that they have on our sense of fairness and competition. So all of those are complicated, nuanced conversations that I think naturally some parents don't want to risk it. Some parents feel that, you know what, to your earlier point, I'll make sure that before they hit puberty, they're expressing themselves in the gender that they were born, and then once they're able to make a determination for themselves that, oh, you know what, I like boys, I like women, then they can make that decision. So I know that that is an approach that some parents take.
Yeah, and I can, like I said, I can certainly see the both sides of the argument when it comes to this. My personal take is that I don't let this consume me, because if anything, this is part of a changing and evolving culture, especially, we've talked on this before about how social media and all the kids growing up with social media, how that has in a way turbocharged how fast society and culture changes. And this is just something new that we're just going to go through. And I would say that most modern advanced economies and countries that reach the status of the US, they would probably go through something similar. And at the end of the day, if like they make it seem like every single kid wants to be transgender, like every single kid wants to have a sex change operation, or every single kid is at risk of being influenced, if that is truly happening, of every kid's being influenced to do it, before they've even got into an age where they realize what it is that they're getting themselves into. But I see it more like a just a natural evolution. And come 10, 15 years, we may discover that this was the wrong path. That, yeah, that a lot of kids did have sex change operations because they were just going along with what adults or parents told them, and that was a mistake. And then we'll correct for that. We'll learn from the mistakes, and then the culture will keep changing, and then it'll become something else. But the idea that you can restrict the way that the culture is evolving by trying to codify it into laws, by trying to do other things, and in her case, by being extreme and saying that we should hang the doctors that are doing these sex change operations. I mean, that's what's going to get you in trouble. Not the fact that the culture is going through this experimental phase. I mean, let it go through that, right? Like, the fear of that and the response to the fear is what's going to fuck things up.
Yeah. I mean,
Not the
that's what
thing
happens
itself.
when scientists argued that the earth was not round, that was flat, right? And they were killed and persecuted for those beliefs. So obviously there's been an evolution. But I think the other point that I just like to make really briefly before we wrap up the conversation is the fact that she talked about follow the money and sort of the financial incentives that pharma
Yeah.
and other interests may have in this, which is true, right?
Yep. Yep.
But when you follow the money, there's also, I mean, the follow the money argument applies across the board too, right? You talk about the big interests who are fighting any action around climate change because that impacts their their carbon-based businesses, right? It also there's so many other decisions that do impact financial interests also on the conservative side. So I think it's an is the I guess as part of the conspiracy theory, thinking about that financial, like who's the big moneyed interest that is behind this change, right? Who's to benefit from having these kids go through sex changes, right? So it's interesting that she kind of brings and tries to tie that in financial incentive argument to her.
Yeah, but then come on, like if she's gonna talk about that, she has to bring or analyze that incentive in all aspects of our society, because that's just the economic incentive. These companies are just going to try to find a way to make more money. No different than Lockheed Martin and all these weapons manufacturers make a ton of money from us sending weapons to Ukraine. That's just the money incentive, right? So she's saying follow the money. Yeah, follow it here, follow it in the war industry, follow it in Wall Street, right? Like be consistent, follow it everywhere. That also doesn't say that you should be okay with trying to lynch people, right? It's like people just very selectively pick and choose. And Judeo-Christians should be good at it because they selectively read the Bible. They only read the stuff that they think makes sense, and then they discard all the other shit that makes absolutely no sense. So no surprise that they do the same thing in their real lives when they want to pick and choose things to build their arguments without really seeing the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm saying is that I do agree with some of her criticisms. I do agree that I'm not like I'm still. I think we would have to debate more in terms of how we feel about the type of messaging that young kids are getting in terms of like sex change operations and all that stuff. Because I don't think I would be completely in agreement with some of that, and certainly I don't think I would raise my boys that way. But I'm more than happy to listen to somebody else's explanation and rationale for what they think, why they think that's the case. And but again, wanted to show this video just because towards the end that type of language of like, our opponents are so unhinged that we think it's justifiable to just start lynching them. That's kind of like the hidden message there in what she's saying, and then everybody applauding, which is even scarier, because then now it's not only just her, it's like everyone else in that room. And then fast forward 5 or 10 years and more of this, and then where do we end up? Like, how's the rhetoric gonna change?
Yeah, and actually from the video, I know there was a part there where they also show, you can see that there's a young student in there. So I know that, there's young people getting this type of messaging and toxicity, right? So the way that
Mm-hmm.
they are impacted by hearing this, and again, normalizing that type of behavior.
What would Jesus do? Well, the Bible does have some pretty scary passages about gay people, doesn't it? At least I've heard that so many times. I need to go back and check. I'm not a big Bible reader, but
Yeah, but to your point, that you know Jesus does say, love one another like you love yourself, right? Or like I loved you, and there's all these things about him coming forward for the sinners, for the people the poor,
yeah.
all these things. So to your point, it's also depending on, are you talking about the new El Nuevo Evangelio,
Yeah.
the
New
New
Testament.
Testament or the Old Testament?
Yeah. Oh
Because
yeah.
obviously even within those two, there's contradictions and
Yeah.
things that
I think the Old
that are
Testament
very
is
different.
it gets medieval too. But you know what I suppose to me the worst part of all this is that they're never going to stop arguing, debating sexuality, because it's a spectrum, and you're never going to find a clear delineation of like a male and female. And so for those that stand to benefit from keeping that debate going, they're just going to profit off of this, and they're just going to keep pitting people against each other. It's a spectrum, right? And it's like I mean, it's straightforward for me to think about it that way. Just so many people have a problem with seeing it though. It's so clear cut. No, you have one or the other, and that's it. So anyway, it's just unfortunate that there's just going to be so many people that are going to use this as a divisive wedge to keep on pitting the people against each other, keep on getting votes for a short-term goal, and the end result is that you're going to start getting more and more extreme views like this one's.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
All right, I think we can wrap it up. Any final thoughts there before we close up?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. If you all out there enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. Nos vemos.
Ciao.